They want to help people. Okay. I said, you got to run it
Ok
somewhere
guys,
else.
mwen
That's
selman
and I
vle
just had a meeting with them.
pou
They
nou gen
said
yon
the
ide
problem
de sa
isn't
ka
about
fet la.
how well
Sa
Obamacare
se deba
is a disaster.
numéro
It's
1
too expensive.
entre président.
Cheaper and
C'est ça.
good. He has no plan for health care. Doesn't know what he's talking about.
Right, I have one final question for you,
Sure.
Mr. Vice President. If Senate Republicans, we're talking aggressively about the Supreme Court here, if Senate Republicans go ahead and confirm Justice Barrett, there has been talk about ending the filibuster or even packing the court, adding to the 9 justices there. You call this a distraction by the president, but in fact, it wasn't brought up by the president. It was brought up by some of your Democratic colleagues in the Congress. So my question to you is, you have refused in the past to talk about it. Are you willing to tell the American people tonight whether or not you will support either ending the filibuster or packing the court?
Whatever position I take and become the issue. The issue is the American people should speak. You should go out and vote. You're in voting now. Let people know. It is our senator. I'm not going to answer the question because the question is radical left.
Sa se sa e premier débat entre président Trump avec Biden. Kote mesye ap diskute sou Obamacare. E yo pal nan deuxième segment la.
Keep yapping, man. The people understand, Jeff. 47 years, you've done nothing. They understand.
All right. The second subject is COVID-19, which is an awfully serious
On
subject.
y a pal parle de coronavirus
Let's
la.
try to be serious about it. We've had more than 7 million cases of coronavirus in the United States, and more than 200,000 people have died. Even after we produce a vaccine, experts say that it could be months or even years before we come back to anything approaching normal. My question for both of you is, based on what you have said and done so far and what you have said you would do starting in 2021, why should the American people trust you more than your opponent to deal with this public health crisis going forward? In this case, the question goes to you first, sir. 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Good luck. 200,000 dead. As you said, over 7 million infected in the United States. We, in fact, have 5%, 4% of the world's population, 20% of the deaths. 40,000 people a day are contracting COVID. In addition to that, about between 17 and 1,000 people a day are dying. When he was presented with that number, he said, it is what it is. Well, it is what it is because you are who you are. That's why it is. The president has no plan. He hasn't laid out anything. He knew all the way back in February how serious this crisis was. He knew it was a deadly disease. What did he do? He's on tape as acknowledging he knew it. He said he didn't tell us or give people a warning of it because he didn't want to panic the American people. You don't panic. We were insisting that the Chinese, the people we had on the ground in China should be able to go to Wuhan and determine themselves how dangerous this was. He did not even ask Xi to do that. He told us what a great job Xi was doing. He said we owe him a debt of gratitude for being so transparent with us. And what did he do then? He then did nothing. He waited and waited and waited. He still doesn't have a plan. I laid out back in March exactly what we should be doing. And I laid out again in July what we should be doing. We should be providing all the protective gear possible. We should be providing the money the House has passed in order to be able to go out and get people the help they need to keep their businesses open schools. It costs a lot of money. You should get out of your bunker and get out of the sand trap and get in your golf course and go in the Oval Office and bring together the Democrats and Republicans and fund what needs to be done now to save lives. So if we would have listened to you,
2 minutes, sir.
if we would have listened to you, the country would have been left wide open. Millions of people would have died, not 200,000. And one person is too much. It's China's fault. It should have never happened. They stopped it from going in, but it was China's fault. And by the way, when you talk about numbers, you don't know how many people died in China. You don't know how many people died in Russia. You don't know how
Ça,
many
c'est
people died in
discussion,
India. They don't
messieurs,
exactly
dames. policiers yo a fait exactement sur question coronavirus là, côté président Trump lui-même le dit. Et si tu écoutes sur Biden, si tu attendais ça Biden dit, plus moun tap mouri. Et Biden bay et président Trump responsable. Et nèg yo a fait discussion sur ça. N'a fait essayer suivre.
President Trump saved thousands of lives. Many of your Democrat governors said President Trump did a phenomenal job. We worked with the governor. Oh, really? Go take a look. The governor said I did a phenomenal job. Most of them said that. In fact, people that would not be necessarily on my side said that. People are dying when they get sick. Far fewer people are dying. Done a great job. The only thing I haven't done a good job, and that's because
Yes, bagay yo miel.
I know how to do the job, how to get the job.
well, you didn't do very well. In
Biden dit li
2020.
connaît Jean pour le faire.
You were a disaster. Your own chief of staff said
Trump dit c'est pas connait ça pour le faire, pas connait rien.
Not 200,000. There was
A
no
very-
economic recession.
Monsieur a parlé ensemble.
There was no recession.
You made a point, let him answer.
And there was we didn't shut down the economy. This is his economy he shut down. The reason it's shut down is because, look, you folks at home, how many of you got up this morning and had an empty chair at the kitchen table because someone died of COVID? How many of you are in a situation where you
Mais
lost
c'est Biden a
your
expliqué
mom or
là,
dad,
ou même
you
qui la
couldn't speak to
caillou,
them,
combien
you
moun
gotta
qui
hold the
mouri,
phone up so you could, in fact,
combien
say,
moun wè qui pas la caillou à cause coronavirus ça.
you would have been.
And by the way, his own CDC director says we could lose as many as another 200,000 people between now and the end of the
Et
year.
nous capables
And
de
he ultimately said,
perdre
if we just
200 000
wear a mask,
encore
we
là.
can save half those
Comment c'est
numbers.
jeudi
Just
pour
the
on est
mask.
encore.
And by the way, in terms of the whole notion of a vaccine, we're for a vaccine.
Focusing on the future first, President Trump, you have repeatedly either contradicted or been at odds with some of your government's own top scientists. The week before last, the head of Dr. Slaoui, the head of your Operation Warp Speed, has said exactly the same thing. Are they
done by the end of the year? But the distribution of that vaccine will not have time beginning or the middle of next year to get it out. If we get the vaccine, and pray God we will. Pray God we will.
can trust the scientists, but they can't trust President Trump? And again, tonight, you're running the press, given the fact that
And by the way,
to the scientists that are in charge,
by the way,
they will have the vaccine.
But you believe for a moment what he's telling you and all the lies he's told you about the whole issue relating to COVID. He still hasn't even acknowledged that he knew this was happening, knew how dangerous it was going to be back in February, and he didn't even tell you. He's on record as saying it. He panicked or he just looked at the stock market. One of the two. Because guess what? A lot of people died, and a lot more are going to die unless he gets smarter a lot quicker, Mr. President.
Did you use the word smart? So you said you went to Delaware State, but you forgot the name of your college. You didn't go to Delaware State. You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me. Don't ever use that word.
Oh, give me a break.
Because you know what? There's nothing smart about you, Joe. 47 years you've done nothing.
Let's have this debate.
Let me just tell you something, Joe.
No,
If you would have had the charge of what I was put through, I had to close the greatest economy in the history of our country. And by the way, now it's being built again.
See, it's
We're
going
going
up
into the
fast.
economy in the next segment, sir.
Okay.
It's going up fast.
Okay.
Look forward to it.
When it comes to how the virus has been handled so far, the two of you have taken very different approaches, and this is going to affect how the virus is handled going forward by whichever of you ends up becoming the next president. I want to quickly go through several of those. Reopenings. Vice President Biden, you have been much more reluctant than President Trump about reopening the economy and schools. Why, sir?
Because he doesn't have a plan. If I were running, I know what the plan is. You've got to provide these businesses the ability to have the money to be able with the PPE as well as with the sanitation they need. You have to
Tell
provide
that
them
to Nancy
plastic.
Pelosi.
Well, he's just shush for a minute. Tell me, Nancy Pelosi and Schumer, they have a plan. He won't even meet with them. The Republicans won't meet with him. He sits on his golf course. And, well, I mean, literally, think about it.
You probably play more than I do, Joe.
What about this question of reopenings and the fact?
Well, he wants to shut down this country, and I want to keep it open. And we did a great thing by shutting it down. Wait a minute, Joe. Let me shut you down for a second, Joe, just for 1 second. He wants to shut down the country. We just went through it. We had to because we didn't know anything about the disease. Now we found that elderly people with heart problems and diabetes and different problems are very, very vulnerable. We learned a lot. Young children aren't. Even younger people aren't. We've learned a lot. But at certain states that have been shut down, they have Democrat governors all. One of the reasons they're shut down is because they want to keep it shut down until after the election.
All right,
November
I want to
3rd.
move on to another
Because
subject.
it's a
I want to move
political
on to another
thing.
subject.
But those states are not doing well that are shut down right now.
Respond to that.
President Trump, you have begun to increasingly question the effectiveness of masks as a disease preventer. And in fact, recently you cited the issue of waiters touching their masks and touching plates. Are you questioning
No, I
the
think masks are
efficacy
okay. You have to understand, if you look, I mean, I have a mask right here. I put a mask on it, when I think I need it. Tonight, as an example, everybody's had a test and you've had social distancing and all of the things that you have to, but I wear masks when needed. When needed, I wear masks.
Okay, let me ask.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen. I will say,
Vice President Biden, go ahead, sir.
Look, the way to open businesses is give them the wherewithal to be able to open. We provided money.
And I was asking you, sir, about masks.
Well, masks make a big difference. His own head of the CDC said if we just wore masks between now, everybody wore masks and social distance between now and January, we'd probably save up to 100,000 lives. It matters.
and they've also said the opposite.
Les gars, je dis, vous nou wè,
Said the opposite.
pati sa, map kite nou la, nou brale sou Facebook, peut-être on lot moun kapab gade, e mte me pou nou gade, sa kap pasi ya, nek yo a fe diskusyon sou map, e sou interese, di m pou m kite la toujou.
Trump, you're holding large rallies with crowds packed together, thousands of people. Outside, yes, sir. Agreed. Vice President Biden, you are holding much smaller events with
Nobody will show up.
people with
What's true? Nobody shows up to his rally.
All right. In any case, why you holding the big rallies? Why you not? You go first, sir.
Because people want to hear what I have to say. I mean,
But are you not
I've done a
worried
great
about
job as a
spreading disease?
president, and I'll have 25, 35,000 people show up at airports. We use airports.
Are you not worried
So
about
we
the
have a
disease
lot of
issues,
people.
sir?
Well, so far, we have had no problem whatsoever. It's outside. That's a big difference according to the do them outside. We have tremendous crowds, as you see. I mean, and literally on 24 hours notice, Johnson has 3 people someplace.
Okay.
By the way, did you see one of the last big rallies he had? And a reporter came up to him to ask him a question. He said, no, stand back. Put on your mask. Put on a mask. Have you been tested? I'm way far away from those other people. And that's what he said. I can't, I'm going to be okay. He's not worried about you. He's not worried about the people out there breathing one another.
We've had no negative effect.
No negative effect.
We've had no negative effect. And we've had 35, 40,000
All right.
people
You want to
in these rallies.
just
Yes.
quickly finish up because I want to move on to our next.
Yes, I would. He's been totally irresponsible the way in which he has handled the social distancing and people wearing masks, basically encouraged them not to.
All right.
Then he's a fool on this.
If you could get the crowds, you would have done the same thing. But you can't. Nobody can.
Faster than expected from the shutdown
Much faster.
in the second quarter. The unemployment rate fell to 8.4% last month. The Federal Reserve says the hit to growth, which is going to be there, is not going to be nearly as big as they had expected. President Trump, you say we are in a V-shaped recovery. Vice President Biden, you say it's more of a K-shape. What difference does that mean to the American people in terms of the economy? President Trump, in this segment, you go first.
So we built the greatest economy in history. We closed it down because of the China plague. Plague came in, we closed it down, which was very hard psychologically to do. He didn't think we should close it down, and he was wrong. And again, 2 million people would be dead now instead of still 204,000 people is too much. One person is too much. Should have never happened from China. But what happened is we closed it down and now we're reopening and we're doing record business. We had 10.4 million people in a 4-month period that we've put back into the workforce. That's a record the likes of which nobody's ever seen before. And he wants to close down he will shut it down again. He will destroy this country. You know, a lot of people between drugs and alcohol and depression, when you start shutting it down, you take a look at what's happening in some of your Democrat-run states where they have these tough shutdowns. And I'm telling you, it's because they don't want to open. One of them came out last week. You saw that. Oh, we're going to open up on November 9th. Why November 9th? Because it's after the election. They think they're hurting us by keeping them closed. They're hurting people. People know what to do. They can social distance. They can wash their hands. They can wear masks. They can do whatever they want. But they got to open these states up. Look at North Carolina. When you look at these governors are under siege. Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a couple of others. You got to open these states up. It's not fair. You're talking about almost it's like being in prison. And you look at what's going on with divorce, look at what's going on with alcoholism, drugs. It's a very, very sad thing. And he'll close down the whole country. This guy will close down the whole country and destroy our country. Our country is coming back incredibly well, setting records as it does it. We don't need somebody to come in and say, let's shut it.
V-shaped recovery, you say it's a K-shaped recovery. What's the difference?
The difference is Kim made another $300 billion because of his profligate tax proposal, and he only focused on the market. But you folks at home, you folks living in Scranton and Claymont and all the small towns and working class towns in America, how well are you doing? This guy paid a total of $750 for taxes.
Wait, no, sir, it's just, yeah, I understand. You've agreed to the 2 minutes, so please let him have it.
Do I get my time back? The fact is that he has, in fact, worked on this in a way that he's going to be the first president of the United States to leave office having fewer jobs in his administration than when he became president. Fewer jobs than when he became president. First one in American history. Secondly, the people who have lost their jobs are those people who have been on the front lines, those people who have been saving our lives, those people who have been out there dying. People who've been putting themselves in a way to make sure that we could all try to make it. And the idea that he is insisting that we go forward and open when you have almost half the states in America with a significant increase in COVID deaths and COVID cases in the United States of America. And he wants to open it up more. Why does he want to open it up? Why doesn't he take care of the American? You can't fix the economy until you fix the COVID crisis. And he has no intention of doing anything about making it better all at home in terms of your health and your safety. Schools. Why aren't schools open? Because it costs a lot of money to open them safely. You know, they were going to give, his administration was going to give the teachers and school students masks. And then they decided, no, couldn't do that because it's not a national emergency. Not a national emergency. They've done nothing to help small businesses. Nothing. They're clean. 1 in 6 is now gone. He ought to get on the job and take care of the needs of the American people so we can open safely.
All right, your time is up, sir. Well, we're going to get to
I have to respond to that.
Well, you both got 2 minutes, sir.
Excuse me, he made a statement.
So did you.
People want their schools open. They don't want to be shut down. They don't want their state shut down. They want their restaurants. I look at New York. It's so sad what's happening in New York. It's almost like a ghost town. And I'm not sure it can ever recover what they've done in New York. People want their places open. They want to get back to their lives. They'll be careful, but they want their schools open.
Okay.
I'm the one that brought back football. By the way, I brought back Big Ten football. It was me, and I'm very happy to do it. And
All right,
people of Ohio are very proud of me. And you know how I got that? When it took
Gentlemen, we're going to get to your economic plans going forward in a moment. But first, Mr. President, as you well know, there's a new report that in 2016, the year you were elected president, and 2017, your first year as president, that you paid $750 a year in federal income tax each of those years. I know that you pay a lot of other taxes, but I'm asking you the specific question. Is it true that you pay $750 in federal income taxes each of those 2 years?
I paid millions of dollars in taxes, millions of dollars of income tax. And let me just tell you, there was a story in one of the papers. I paid $38 million one year. I paid 27 million.
Show us your tax
one year.
returns.
I went. You'll see it as soon as it's finished. You'll see it. You know, if you want to do, go to the Board of Elections. There's a 118-page or so report that says everything I have, every bank I have, I'm totally under leveraged because the assets are extremely good, and I built a
Sir, I'm
great
asking you
company.
a specific question, which
But
is.
let me tell you.
I understand all of that. I understand all of that.
But
No, Mr. President,
Go ahead.
I'm asking you a question. Will you tell us how much you paid in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017?
Millions of dollars.
You paid millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars.
So
yes.
not something like
millions of dollars, and you get to see it.
I-
And you get to see
When?
it. But let me just tell you, Chris, let me just tell you something, that it was the tax laws. I don't want to pay. Before I came here, I was a private developer. I was a private business people. Like every other private person, unless they're stupid, they go through the laws, and that's what it is. He passed a tax bill that gave us all these privileges for depreciation and for tax credits. We built a building and we get tax credits, like the hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue. You get a massive, which, by the way, was given to me by the Obama administration, if you can believe that. Now, the man got fired right after that happened. But
Vice President Biden, you want to respond?
Yeah, I do want to respond. Look, the tax code that made him, that put him in a position that he pays less tax than a school teacher on the money a school teacher makes, is because of him he says he's smart because he can take advantage of the tax code. And he does take advantage of the tax code. So I'm going to eliminate the Trump tax cuts, and we're going to eliminate those tax cuts and make sure that we invest in the people who, in fact, need the help. People out there need help.
But why didn't you do it over in the last 25 years?
Because you were
Why didn't you do it over
because you weren't president screwing things up.
You were a senator.
You're the worst
you were a
president
vice-
America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
let me just say, Joe, I've done more in 47 months. I've done more than you've done in 47 years, Joe. We've done things that you never even thought of doing, including
Gentlemen.
fixing the broken military that you gave me,
But
including taking care
We're
of your
talking,
debts.
Mr. President, we're talking about the economy. I'd like to ask you about your plans going forward, because, Mr. Vice President, your economic plan, if you were to be elected president, focuses a lot on big government, big taxes, big spending. I want to focus first on the taxes. You propose more than $4 trillion over a decade in new taxes on individuals making more than $400,000 a year and on corporations. President Trump says that kind of an increase in taxes is going to hurt the economy as it's just coming out of a recession.
Well, just take a look at what is the analysis done by Wall Street firms. Points out that my economic plan would create 7 million more jobs than his in 4 years, number one. And number two, it would create an additional $1 trillion in economic growth, because it would be about buying American. That we're going to make this federal government spend $600 billion a year on everything from ships to steel to buildings and the like. And under my proposal, we're going to make sure that every penny of that has to be made by a company.
But respectfully, sir, I'm talking about taxes, not spending.
Well, by the way, I'm going to eliminate a significant number of the tax. I'm going to make the corporate tax 28%. It shouldn't be 21%. You have 91 companies, in the Fortune 500, don't pay a single penny in tax, making billions of dollars.
Why didn't you do it
Billions of dollars.
You were vice president with Obama.
Because you, in fact, passed that. That was
Right.
your
I
tax
got
proposal.
it done. And you know what happened?
You got it done.
Our economy boomed
And
like it's never boomed.
the economy
Mr. President, let me pick up on that.
Monsieur a discuté
Would
sou
continue
question
your
taxe
free
nan
market
peyi ya.
approach, lower taxes, more deregulation, correct?
not lower tax to American people.
But let me,
Excuse me.
but in Obama's, you talk about the economy booming. It turns out that in Obama's final 3 years as president, more jobs were created, 1.5 million more jobs than in the first 3 years of your presidency.
They had the slowest recovery economic recovery since 1929. It was the slowest recovery. Also, they took over something that was down here. All you had to do is turn on the lights and you pick up a lot. But they had the slowest economic recovery since 1929. Let me tell you about the stock market. When the stock market goes up, that means jobs. It also means 401ks. If you got in, if you ever became president with your ideas, you want to terminate my taxes, I'll tell you what, You'll lose half of the companies that have poured in here will leave, and plenty of
Half of the
companies that are
companies-
already here, they'll leave for
Private
other
companies
places.
have-
They will leave, and you will have a
Private-
depression, the likes
that-
of which you've never seen.
Look,
Mr.
we
Vice President.
inherited the worst recession short of a depression in American history. I was asked to bring it back. We were able to have an economic recovery that created the jobs you're talking about. We handed him a booming economy. He blew it.
It wasn't
He blew
booming.
it. He
It
blew
wasn't booming.
It was not.
It was the weakest
Well,
recovery
sir, is it
since
fair to, wait, is it fair to say he blew it when, in
When
fact, there was
COVID hit.
when there was record low unemployment
Yeah.
before COVID?
Yeah, but because what he did, even before COVID, manufacturing went in the hole. Manufacturing went in the hole.
Excuse
Number
me,
one.
Chris. Wait.
Number two.
Chris.
Number three.
They said it would take. No, you were number two.
No.
Chris. They said it would
This
take a
guy.
miracle to bring back manufacturing. I brought back 700,000 jobs. They brought back nothing. They gave up on manufacturing.
We did not
My
bring
standard fare.
I'm the guy
He
that brought
totally
back
gave
the
up on
automobile
manufacturing.
industry.
All right, let him make.
We brought back, I was asked to bring back Chrysler and General Motors. We brought them back right here in the state of Iowa and Michigan. He blew it. They're gone. He blew it. And in fact, they're going.
Ohio had the best year it's ever had last year. Michigan had the best year they've ever had.
That is not
Many
true.
car companies
Not
came in
true.
from Germany, from Japan, went to Michigan, and went to
They're
Ohio.
not.
And they didn't come in with you.
Mr. Vice President, go ahead.
And so you take a look at what he's actually done. He's done very little. His trade deals are the same way. He talks about these great trade deals. You know, he talks about the art of the deal. China's perfected the art of the steal. We have a higher deficit with China now than we did before. We have the highest trade deficit
China
with
ate
Mexico.
your lunch. They're
All right,
at
gentlemen,
18%.
in-
China ate your lunch, Joe. And no wonder your son goes in and he takes out billions of dollars. Takes out billions of dollars to manage. He makes millions of dollars. And also, while we're at it, why is it, just out of curiosity, the mayor of Moscow's wife gave your son $3.5 million. What did he do to deserve it? What did he do with Burisma
None
to
of
deserve
that.
$183,000?
You asked a question and an answer.
None of that is true.
Oh, really?
Totally,
But no, Mr. President,
It's
Mr.
totally-
President, please.
totally
ask the question.
discredited. Totally discredited. And by the way,
Well, wait, he didn't get
No, no.
$3.5 million, Joe?
Mr. Vice,
He got
Mr.
$3.5 million.
President,
it is not true.
Oh, really?
Mr.
Oh,
President,
But Mr.
it's an open discussion, please.
No,
It's a fact.
Well,
There's-
you
there's
have
not.
raised an issue, let the
It's been
Vice
totally
President answer.
discredited.
Did
It was a
Burisma pay him
report.
$183,000 a month with no experience in energy?
Mr.
Look,
President,
my son did nothing wrong at Burisma.
I think he did.
Mr.
The only
President,
guy that
let him
didn't-
answer.
He doesn't want to let me answer because he knows I have the truth. His position has been totally, thoroughly discredited.
By who?
And you
The
got-
media.
By everybody. Well, by the
By the
media,
media,
by our
because they
allies,
refuse to
by
talk
the
about
World
peaceful
Bank,
balance.
by everyone has discredited. Matter of fact,
Mr.
even the people
President,
who testified under oath.
So let me ask you this.
Under
No, no,
oath.
go ahead, Mr. I'm listening to you.
People under.
You got $3.5 million from Moscow.
He testified under oath in his administration, said, I did my job and I did it very well. I did it
I'd like to know who they are.
well, I'll give you the list of the
I'll find
people who
No,
testified.
no, go ahead, sir.
Sure, you've already fired most of them because they did a good job.
Some people don't do
Well,
a good
here's,
job. With
You
you,
get the, wait a minute, you get the final word.
well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown. Excuse me, this.
and let me just say to you,
No, I'm Mr. President. I'm
$3.5
Mr.
million,
President.
Joe.
That is simply.
Why did
not
he
true.
deserve $3.5 million from Moscow?
Look, here's the deal. We want to talk about families and ethics. I don't want to do that. I mean, his family we could talk about all night. His family's
My
already.
family,
You guys wanna-
my family lost a fortune by coming down and helping us with government.
And that's such a.
Mr.
That's
President.
such
Every
a
single one of them lost.
This
a
is not
fortune.
about my family or his family. It's about your family.
They
The
didn't
American
bring
people.
$3.5 million.
He doesn't. That's not true. It doesn't want to talk about what you need. You, the American people. It's about you. That's what we're talking about.
All right, that's the end of the segment. We're moving on.
He didn't take that.
Vice President, no.
Can I be honest? It's a very important
Try to be
question.
honest.
I
He
was
stood
thinking-
up.
No,
stood up
the answer to the question is no.
Ukraine.
No, sir.
With $1 billion, if you
That
had rid of
is
the
you know what, you're
absolutely not
Stop.
true.
Take doing it.
You're going to
Not
have,
true.
gentlemen,
Is
I hate to raise my voice, but I think it needs to be, why should not be different than the two of you? So here's the deal.
good point.
We have 6 segments. We have ended that segment we're going to go to the next segment. In that segment, you each are going to have 2 uninterrupted moments. In those 2 uninterrupted minutes, Mr. President, you can say anything you want. I'm going to ask a question about race, but if you want to answer about something else, go ahead. But I think that the country would be better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer interruptions. I'm appealing to you, sir, to do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more interrupting.
Oh, that's all right, but he does plenty.
Well, less than you, sir, less than
plenty.
No, less than you have. Let's please continue on. The issue of race. Vice President Biden, you say that President Trump's response to the violence in Charlottesville 3 years ago, when he talked about very fun people on both sides, was what directly led you to launch this run for president.
Oh, yes, sir.
President Trump, you have often said that you believe you have done more for Black Americans than any president, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln. My question for the 2 of you is, why should voters trust you rather than your opponent to deal with the race issues facing this country over the next 4 years? Vice President Biden.
It's about equity and equality. It's about decency. It's about the Constitution. And we have never walked away from trying to require equity for everyone, equality for the whole of America. But we've never accomplished it. But we've never walked away from it like he has done. It is true. The reason I got in the race is when those people, close your eyes, remember what those people look like coming out of the fields carrying torches, their veins bulging, just spewing anti-Semitic bile, and accompanied by the Ku Klux Klan. A young woman got killed. And they asked the president what he thought. He said there were very fine people on both sides. No president's ever said anything like that.
It is
now,
sir.
Second point I'd make to you is that when Floyd was killed, when Mr. Floyd was killed, there was a peaceful protest in front of the White House. What did he do? He came out of his bunker, had the military use tear gas on him so he could walk across to a church and hold up a Bible. And then what happened after that? The bishop of that very church said that it was a disgrace. The general who was with him said all he ever wants to do is divide people, not unite people at all. This is a president who has used everything as a dog whistle to try to generate racist hatred, racist division. This is a man who, in fact, you talk about helping African Americans. 1 in 1,000 African Americans has been killed because of the coronavirus. And if he doesn't do something quickly, by the end of the year, 1 in 500 will have been killed. 1 in 500 African Americans. This man is a savior of African Americans. This man cares at all. This man's done virtually nothing. Look, the fact is that you have to look at what he talks about. You have to look at what he did. And what he did has been disastrous for the African-American community.
So, President Trump, you have 2 minutes. Why should Americans trust you over your opponent to deal with racism?
He did a crime bill, 1994, where you call them super predators, African Americans, super predators, and they've never forgotten it. They've never forgotten it, Jefferson.
No, sir, it's his 2 minutes.
So you did that, and they called you a super predator, and I'm letting people out of jail now that you have treated the African American population community, you have treated the Black community about as bad as anybody in this country. You did and that's why, if you look at the polls, I'm doing better than any Republican has done in a long time, because they saw what you did. You called them super predators, and you've called them worse than that, because you look back at your testimony over the years, you've called them a lot worse than that. As far as the church is concerned, and as far as the generals are concerned, we just got the support of 250 military leaders and generals, total support. Law enforcement, almost every law enforcement group in the United States. I have Florida, I have Texas, I have Ohio, I have Portland. The sheriff just came out today and he said, I support President Trump. I don't think you have any law enforcement. You can't even say the word law enforcement, because if you say those words, you're going to lose all of your radical left supporters. And why aren't you saying those words, Joe? Why don't you say the words law enforcement? Because you know what? If they called us in Portland, we would put out that fire in a half an hour, but they won't do it because they're run by radical lefts. If you look at Chicago, if you look at any place you want to look, Seattle, they heard we were coming in the following day and they put up their hands and we got back Seattle. Minneapolis, we got it back, Joe, because we believe in law and order, but you don't. The top 10 cities and just about the top 40 cities are run by Democrats and in many cases radical left. And they've got you wrapped around their finger, Joe, to a point where you don't want to say anything about law and order. And I'll tell you what, the people of this country want and demand law and order, and you're afraid to even say it.
All right. I want to return to the question of race. Vice President Biden, after the grand jury in the Breonna Taylor case decided not to charge any of the police with homicide, you said it raises the question, quote, whether justice could be equally applied in America. Do you believe that there is a separate but unequal system of justice for blacks in this country? Yes,
There's systemic injustice in this country, in education and work and in law enforcement and the way in which it's enforced. But look, the vast majority of police officers are good, decent, honorable men and women. They risk their lives every day to take care of us. But there are some bad apples. And when they occur, when they find them, they have to be sorted out. They have to be held accountable. They have to be held accountable. And what I'm going to do as President of the United States is call together an entire group of people at the White House, well, everything from the civil rights groups to the police officers, the police chiefs, and we're going to work this out. We're going to work this out so we change the way in which we have more transparency in when these things happen. These cops aren't happy to see what happened to George Floyd. These cops aren't happy to see what happened to Breonna Taylor. Most don't like it. But we have to have a system where people are held accountable. And by the way, violence in response is never appropriate. Never appropriate. Peaceful protest is. Violence is never appropriate.
All right,
what is peaceful protest? When they run.
President Trump,
but you say it is.
President Trump, I'd like to continue with the issue of race. I promise we're going to get to the issue of law and order in a moment. This month, your administration directed federal agencies to end racial sensitivity training that addresses white privilege or critical race theory. Why did you decide to do that, to end racial sensitivity training? And do you believe that there is systemic racism in this country, sir?
I ended it because it's racist. I ended it because a lot of people were complaining that they were asked to do things that were absolutely insane, that it was a radical revolution that was taking place in our military, in our schools, all over the place. And you know it, and so does everybody else. And he would know.
What is totally racial sensitivity training?
If you were a certain person, you had no status in life. It was sort of a reversal. And if you look at the people, we were paying people hundreds of thousands of dollars to very bad ideas and frankly, very sick ideas. And really, they were teaching people to hate our country. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to allow that to happen. We have to go back to the core values of this country. They were teaching people that our country is a horrible place. It's a racist place. And they were teaching people to hate our country. And I'm not going to allow that to happen.
Vice President Biden?
Nobody's doing that. He's a racist.
You just don't.
Here's the deal. I know a lot more about this.
Let him finish.
The fact is that there is racial insensitivity. People have to be made aware of what other people feel like, what insults them, what is demeaning to them. It's important that people know they don't want to. Many people don't want to hurt other people's feelings, but it makes a big difference. It makes a gigantic difference in the way a child is able to grow up and have a sense of self-esteem. It's a little bit like how this guy and his friends look down on so many people. They look down their nose on people like Irish Catholics like me and grew up in Scranton. They look down on people who don't have money. They look down on people who are of a different faith. They look down on people who are a different color. In fact, we're all Americans. The only way we're going to bring this country together is bring everybody together. There's nothing we cannot do if we do it together. We can take this on and we can defeat racism.
President Trump, sir.
During the Obama-Biden administration, there was tremendous division. There was hatred. You look at Ferguson, you go to very many places. Look at Oakland. Look what happened in Oakland. Look what happened in Baltimore. Look what happened. Frankly, it was more violent than what I'm even seeing now. But the reason is that the Democrats that run these cities don't want to talk like you about law and order.
Violent
you
crime.
Still haven't mentioned.
Violent
Are you
crime.
in favor of law and order?
I'm in favor of law. You follow.
Are you in
it. A
favor
little
of
bit
law and order? Go ahead,
Some of
If he wants a question, let him finish.
Law and order.
This is
Law and order.
Let him.
Law and order with justice. will get treated fairly. And the fact of the matter is, violent crime went down 17%, 15% in our administration. It's gone up on his watch.
Went down much more than ours.
All right, we're down to your Mr. President. You're going to Mr. President.
Every record in the
Mr. President, you're going to be very happy because we're now going to talk about law and order.
We had trouble. We're Democratic-run cities.
That's exactly my question. There has been a dramatic increase in homicides in America this summer, particularly, and you often blame that on Democratic mayors and Democratic governors, but in fact, there have been equivalent spikes in Republican-led cities like Tulsa and Fort Worth. So the question is this really a party issue?
I think it's a party issue. You can bring in a couple of examples, but if you look at Chicago, what's going on in Chicago, where 53 people were shot and 8 died shot. If you look at New York, where it's going up like nobody's ever seen anything, the numbers are going up 100, 150, 200% crime. It is crazy what's going on. And he doesn't want to say law and order because he can't, because he'll lose his radical left supporters. And once he does that, it's over with. But if he ever got to this country and they ran it the way he would want to run it, we would have, our suburbs would be gone. By the way, our suburbs would be gone. And you would see problems like
He
you've never
would
seen.
know a suburb unless he took a wrong turn.
Oh, I know suburbs.
He would not. I was
Wait.
raised in the suburbs. This is not 1950. All these dog whistles and racing don't work anymore. Suburbs are by and large integrated. There's many people today driving their kids to soccer practice and or to black and white and Hispanic in the same car as there have been any time in the past. What really is a threat to the suburbs and their safety is his failure to deal with COVID. They're dying in the suburbs. His failure to deal with the environment. They're being flooded. They're being burned out because his refusal to do anything. That's why the suburbs are in trouble.
I do want to talk about this issue of law and order, though. And in the joint recommendation that came from the Biden-Bernie Sanders task force, you talked about, quote, reimagining policing.
Yeah.
First of all, what does reimagining policing mean? And do you support,
It means
let me, if I might finish the question, what does reimagining policing mean? And do you support the Black Lives Matter call for community control of policing?
look, what I support is the police having the opportunity to deal with the problems they face. And I'm totally opposed to defunding the police officers. As a matter of fact, local police, the only one defunding in his budget calls for a $400 million cut in local law enforcement assistance. They need more assistance. They need, when they show up for a 9/11 call, to have someone with them as a psychologist or psychiatrist to keep them from having to use force and be able to talk people down. We have to have community policing like we had before, where the officers get to know the people in the communities. That's when crime went down. It didn't go up, it went down. And so we have to be engaged.
That's not what they're talking about, Chris. That's not what they're talking about.
That's
He's talking about
exactly-
defunding the police.
That is not true.
He doesn't have any law
Well,
support. He has no law enforcement.
That's not
support.
true.
Almost
That's
nothing.
not. But look,
Oh, really? Who do you have? Name one group that supports you. Name one group that came out and supported you. Go
Look,
ahead.
look.
Think. We have time.
we don't have time to do
No,
anything.
think
All right.
about it.
right,
Name
folks.
one law enforcement group that came
I
out
think,
and supported
gentlemen, I think I'm going to take back the
There
bottom
are.
line as
I don't
well,
think there
and
are any.
I want to get to another subject, which is the issue of protests in many cities that have turned violent. In Portland, Oregon, especially, we had more than 100 straight days of protests, which I think you would agree. You talk about peaceful protests. Many of those turned into riots. Mr. Vice President, you say that people who commit crimes should be held accountable. The question I have, though, is as the Democratic nominee, and earlier tonight you said that you are the Democratic Party right now, have you ever called the Democratic mayor of Portland or the Democratic governor of Oregon and said, hey, you got to stop this, bring in the National Guard, do whatever it takes, but you stop the days and months of violence in Portland?
I don't hold public office now. I am a former vice president. I've made it clear in my public statements that the violence should be prosecuted. It should be prosecuted. And anyone who commits it
But
should
you've
be
never
prosecuted.
called for the people, the leader, excuse me, sir. You have never called for the leaders in Portland and in Oregon to call and bring in the National Guard and knock off 100 days of riots.
They can, in fact, take care of it if he just stay out of the way. Look here.
Oh, really?
Here.
Oh, really?
Here's the
But
thing.
that's
sent in the US Marshals to get the killer of a young man in the middle of the street, and they shot him. And for 3 days,
President Trump,
Portland wouldn't do anything. I had to send in the US Marshals, and they took care of business.
Go ahead, sir.
And by the way, his own former spokesperson said, riots and chaos and violence help us cause. That's what this is all about.
I don't know who said that.
I do.
Who?
I think Kellyanne Conway.
I don't think she said.
She said that. And so here's the point.
Go
The
ahead.
point is that's what he keeps trying to rile everything up. He doesn't want to calm things down. Instead of going in and talking to people and saying, let's get everybody together, figure out how to deal with this. What's he do? He just pours gasoline in the fire constantly and every single solitary
Okay,
time.
and to end this, button up this segment, I'm going to give you a minute to answer, sir. You have repeatedly
Well, we don't
criticized.
have to answer his
No,
statement.
you have
His
repeatedly.
Wait,
You have
just wait a
no.
second.
You've been talking.
He
back
made
and
a
forth.
statement.
I'm asking you.
I would love to end it.
sir.
I would love to end it.
And if you want to switch seats, we can
very quickly.
We can do that. But I'm
Send
no,
in the National Guard, it would be over. There'd be no problem.
okay.
But they don't want to accept the National Guard.
You have repeatedly criticized the vice president for not specifically calling out Antifa and other wing
That's right.
extremist groups. But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups
Sure.
and to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland? Are you
willing
prepared
to
to
do that.
specifically
But
do it? Go ahead.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right
So
wing.
what are you
If
saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see
Well, then
peace.
do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
What
right
would you like me to condemn?
supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem. This is a left.
FBI director.
This is a left-wing problem.
White supremacist. Antifa's an idea, not an
Oh,
organization.
you got it.
Not militia. That's what
It's
his
an idea.
His FBI director said.
Well, then you know what?
We're done, sir. We're
Everybody,
moving on to the next. We're moving.
that is your that's not an idea.
Pourtant, il était là avec nous.
Administration tells
Il
you
nous
the
dit
truth
nous
is a
parti
bad
ça.
idea.
Can I tell you what?
Je pense que nous enjoy nous.
Antifa
Sûrement que
is a
comprendre.
dangerous
All right,
radical
gentlemen, we're
group.
now
Nous allons
moving on to the
traduire
Trump
vous. Merci beaucoup. Et
Over
après
When the
next
president-
party
I'm gonna ask a question.
après
When the
party ça.
president seeks
Merci
a
beaucoup
second
guys.
term,
Take care and have
it
a
is
good night.
generally a
Ciao.
referendum on his record. But Vice President Biden, you like to quote one of your dad's sayings, which is, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. And in this case, sir, you are the alternative. Looking at both of your rights, I'm going to ask each of you, why should voters elect you president over your opponent? In this segment, President Trump, you go first, 2 minutes.
Because there has never been an administration or president who has done more than I've done in a period of 3.5 years. And that's despite the impeachment hoax. And you saw what happened today with Hillary Clinton, where it was a whole big con job. But despite going through all of these things, where I had to fight both flanks and behind me and above, there has never been an administration that's done what I've done. The greatest, before COVID came in, the greatest economy in history, lowest unemployment numbers. Everything was good. Everything was going. And by the way, there was unity going to happen. People were calling me for the first time in years. They were calling and they were saying, it's time maybe. And then what happened? We got hit, but now we're building it back up again. A rebuilding of the military, including Space Force and all of the other things. A fixing of the VA, which was a mess under him. 308,000 people died because they didn't have proper health care. He was a mess. And we now got a 91% approval rating at the VA, our vets. We take care of our vets. But we've rebuilt our military. The job that we've done, and I'll tell you something, some people say maybe the most important, by the end of the first term, I'll have approximately 300 federal judges and Court of Appeals judges, 300, and hopefully 3 great Supreme Court justices. That is a record the likes of which very few people, and you know one of the reasons I have so many judges? Because President Obama and him left me 128 judges to fill. When you leave office, you don't leave any judges. That's like, you just don't do that. They left 128 openings. And if I were a member of his party, because they have a little different philosophy, I'd say if you left us 128 openings. You can't be a good president. You can't be a good vice president. But I want to thank you because it gives us almost, it'll probably be above that number by the end of this term.
Sir.
300 judges. It's a record.
Looking at both your records, why should voters elect you president as opposed to President Trump? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Under this president, we become weaker, sicker, poorer, more divided, and more violent. When I was vice president, we inherited a recession. I was asked to fix it. I did. We left him a booming economy, and he caused a recession. With regard to being weaker, the fact is that I've gone head to head with Putin and made it clear we're not going to take any of his stuff. He's Putin's puppy. He still refuses to even say anything to Putin about the bounty on the heads of American soldiers.
Your son got $3 million.
And by the way,
Wait a minute. Mr. President, your campaign agreed to both sides would get 2-minute answers uninterrupted. Well, your side agreed to it, and why don't you observe what your campaign agreed to as a ground rule, okay, sir?
He never keeps his word.
No, I'm not asking. That was a rhetorical
Non,
question.
question
You have
posée,
30 seconds.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Go
comprenez.
ahead.
So,
Pour qui ça, yo chaque besoin
the
pour faire parler
billionaires
en
have got
voter.
much more wealthy,
On suit
by a
ensemble.
tune of over 300 to 400 billion more just since COVID. You and the home, you got less. You're in more trouble than you were before. In terms of being more violent, when we were in office, there were 15% less violence in America than there is today. He's president of the United States. It's on his watch. And with regard to more divided, the nation can't stay divided. We can't be this way. And speaking of my son, the way you talk about the military, the way you talk about them being losers and being and just being suckers. My son was in Iraq. He spent a year there. He got the Bronze Star. He got the Conspicuous Service Medal. He was not a loser. He was a patriot, and the people left behind there were heroes.
Really?
And I resent
Are you talking
my
about
job.
Hunter? Are you talking
I'm
about Hunter?
talking about my son, Beau Biden. You're talking about
I don't know, Bo. I know Hunter.
Yeah,
Hunter
you know,
Hunter got thrown out of the military. He was thrown out, dishonorably discharged.
That's not true. It
For
wasn't
cocaine
dishonorable.
use, and he didn't have a job until you became vice president. And once you
None of
became
that
vice
is
president, he made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
That is simply
and various
not
other places.
true.
He
My
made a
son,
fortune,
my son,
and he didn't have a
my
job.
son, like a lot of people we know at home, had a drug problem. He's overtaken it. He's fixed it. He's worked on it, and I'm proud of him.
But why was he
I'm proud of
given
my
tens
son.
of millions
All right,
But
of
he
dollars?
wasn't.
It's totally,
President
Totally
Totally
discredited.
We've already been through this. I
débat
think the American
entre
people would
président
rather
Trump
hear
avec
about
Joe
more
Biden.
substantial
So do I.
subjects. Well, you know, as the moderator,
29
sir, I'm going to make a judgment call here.
2020.
$3.5 million
Okay,
from the
right. Let's
mayor
talk
of
about-
Moscow.
let's talk
That's
about
not
it.
true. That report is totally
Why did he
discredited.
I
Mitt Romney on that committee said it wasn't worth taxpayers' money. That report was written for political reasons.
you know, I'd like to talk about climate change.
So would I.
Okay. The forest fires in the West are raging now. They have burned millions of acres. They have displaced hundreds of thousands of people. When state officials there blame the fires on climate change, Mr. President, you said, I don't think the science knows. For your 4 years, you have pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord. You have rolled back a number of Obama environmental records. What do you believe about the science of climate change? And what will you do in the next 4
Question
years
ça,
to confront it?
directement
I
avec
want
Trump.
crystal clean water and air. I want beautiful, clean air. We have now the lowest carbon. If you look at our numbers right now, we are doing phenomenally. But I haven't destroyed our businesses. Our businesses aren't put out of commission. If you look at the Paris Accord, it was a disaster from our standpoint. And people are actually the forest floors are loaded up with trees, dead trees, years old, and they're like tinder, and leaves and everything else. You drop a cigarette and the whole forest burns down. You've got to have forest management.
What do you
You've got to have
believe?
guts.
What do you believe about the science of climate change, sir?
I believe that we have to do everything we can to have immaculate air, immaculate water, and do whatever else we can that's good. You know, we're planting 1 billion trees, the Billion Tree Project, and it's very
Do you
exciting.
believe that human pollution pollution, greenhouse gas emissions contributes to the global warming of the
of our forests. Every year, I get the call, California's burning, California's burning. That was cleaned. If you had forest management, good forest management, you wouldn't be getting those calls. You know, in Europe, they live their forest cities. They're called forest cities. They maintain their forests. They manage their forests. I was with the head of a major country. It's a forest city. He said, sir, we have trees that are far more, they ignite much easier than California. There shouldn't be that problem. I spoke with the governor about it. I'm getting along very well with the governor. But I said, you know, at some point, you can't every year have hundreds of thousands of acres of land just burned to the ground. That's burning down because of a lack of
But
management.
sir, if you believe in the science of climate change, why have you rolled back the Obama Clean Power Plan, which limited carbon emissions in power plants? Why have you relaxed?
Because it was driving energy prices through the sky.
Why have you relaxed fuel economy standards that are going to create more pollution from cars?
Well,
than
not
trucks?
really, because what's happening is the car is much less expensive and it's a much safer car. And you're talking about a tiny difference. And then what would happen, because of the cost of the car, you would have at least double and triple the number of cars purchased. We have the old slugs out there that are 10, 12 years old. If you did that, the car would be safer. It'd be much safer.
California,
Take a lot of cars off the market because people would be able to afford a car. Now, and by the way, we're going to see how that turns out. But a lot of people agree with me. Many people. The car has gotten so expensive because they have computers all over the place for an extra little bit of gasoline. And I'm okay with electric cars too. I think I'm all for electric cars. I've given big incentives for electric cars. But what they've done in California is just crazy.
Vice President Biden, I'd like you to respond to the president's climate change record, but I also want to ask you about a concern. You proposed $2 trillion in green jobs. You talked about new limits, not abolishing, but new limits on fracking, ending the use of fossil fuels to generate electricity by 2035, and zero net emission of greenhouse gases by 2050. The president says a lot of these things would tank the economy and cost millions of jobs.